Okay. Just in case you have a colleague who fails to connect, ask them to go to the YouTube. Can someone talk to me? Do you see my screen? Those of you in the waiting room, please consider joining the following the proceedings on the YouTube channel. We are live there. So I need some feedback. Michelle Tuo, do you hear me?
Yeah.
You see my screen?
Yes.
Good. All right. So encourage people who are not able to join us in the room to go to the YouTube channel. You know what it is, and follow proceedings from there. Today we are going to reflect on the morality of human act. What makes a human act moral or immoral? There are essential ingredients in the morality of the human act. For a human act to be moral or immoral, it must be exercised in freedom. Kennedy Osando, is it true you can't hear? Kibet, you can't hear?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay. All right. So, for an act to be considered moral or immoral, first and foremost, it must be exercised in freedom. The object must be good. The intention must be good. The circumstances might be good. However, there are situations where a good act may have both a good and bad effect. Remember our principle, you only do good and avoid evil. Can you then do an act which you know would result in a bad effect? So in situations where a good act may have a good and bad effect, we will discuss the principle of double effect, which is the principle that we use in reasoning around the question of whether a good act which may have a good and bad effect could in fact be carried out. A good and evil effect. You see, an act is good, but when you do it, it has an effect that is good, or effects that are good, but also effects that are evil. And the question usually in ethical reasoning is whether you are able to continue doing that act. Now, I have two people who are saying they see my screen but can't hear me. Is that the general challenge? Angela Mwende, do you hear me? Christine Juki, do you hear me?
Yes.
Natasha Kennedy, do you hear me?
Yes.
I really wonder what these colleagues of yours are struggling with. I've received messages in the chat box indicating they can see the screen but cannot hear. Itali says they can hear, Purity Nyimbaru can hear, Nyambura. Mr. Magdalene, you need to work on your settings on your
I can hear too.
As usual, someone is already messing up our screen. I wonder who that is. Okay. We will continue with our engagement. So those are the essential ingredients when talking about the morality of the human act. So human freedom is a core component when reflecting on the morality of the human act. It is human freedom that makes an act human. It is human freedom that makes an act human. Human acts are distinguishable from acts of man, mainly because an act that is performed only by a human being and thus is proper to man is one that is done in. On the contrary, acts of man are not done in freedom. Acts of man are not done in freedom. If someone brushed their arm very close to your eyes, you would blink. You wouldn't think about it. You just blink, or you duck, or you hide. Okay, you try to protect your eyes, and it happens instantly. That's an act of man. You don't deliberate about it. You don't choose. When you are breathing in and out, you don't even realize you are breathing. The digestive processes going on in our body, the excretion processes via the skin, all these are acts of man. They are involuntary processes that we are involved in, that we are not necessarily deliberative about. Okay, those are what we call acts of man. But when we are talking about the morality of the human act, we are talking about human acts, not acts of man. We talk about acts that have been done out of freedom, meaning someone has deliberated upon doing or not doing. Okay, someone has deliberated about doing or not doing, then they choose to do. Then they choose to do. That, in essence, would be what we call a human act, an act that is carried out in freedom. Man is rational, and therefore, like God, man is created with free will and is a master of their own act. We usually say that God created man as a rational being and conferred on man the dignity of a person who can initiate and control his own actions. For God willed that man should be left in the hand of his own counsel, so that man might of his own accord seek the Creator and freely attain his full and blessed perfection by cleaving to the Creator. Okay, so because we are rational beings, we are free beings. We can deliberate on what we are about to do, and then we do it. We choose to do it. I'd like to encourage Ruth Busiene and Kennedy Osando to try and solve the audio challenge from their end. It would seem other people are able to hear. Then there's the question of freedom and responsibility. In order to understand the morality of human act, they must discover the relationship that exists between freedom and responsibility. Just like we discussed in the fundamental moral principles, where we had the principle, do unto others what you would have them do to you, we have this philosopher Immanuel Kant, who proposed that everyone should act in such a way that if all acted the way he or she has acted, all would be well. Okay? You should act in such a way that all would be well if everyone acted as you have acted. So each individual freedom should be exercised in a manner that does not impinge on the freedom of the other. Right now, we have chosen to be in this room to dialogue over the question of the morality of the human act. But someone would have their microphone on and goes ahead to make all the kinds of noises. They are free to be noisy, but if that freedom of theirs is impinging on the freedom of others to listen in on what is going on in the session, that would be an abuse of freedom. Okay, so human acts are moral to the extent that they are free acts. Our freedom derives from the fact that we are rational beings created with dignity of the person. But our freedom is not freedom if not exercised in responsibility. Freedom essentially is the power rooted in reason. You remember we talked of rationality. So freedom is the power rooted in reason and will. Now, those of you who attended the presentation on bioethics, was it Thursday also, you understand the distinction between the question of will and intellect and appetitiveness or effectiveness. But yes, freedom is rooted in reason and will. To act, the freedom to act or not to act, the freedom to do this or to do that, and so to perform deliberate actions on one's own responsibility. The freedom is a power, and it is a power rooted in reason and will. It is a power to act or not to act, the power to do one thing and not another, and the power to act having deliberated on the actions in view of one's responsibility. And by free will, one shapes their own life. So we can say that human freedom is a force for growth. Human freedom is a force for maturity, and it is maturity in truth and goodness. Human freedom attains its perfection when it is directed towards God and our beatitude. Now, this word beatitude is not new to you. Remember, we said we all desire to be happy. Okay, so it is in the pursuit of human freedom, exercised in line with the pursuit of truth and goodness, that we could actually pursue the necessary perfection. There are two types of freedom. We have basic freedom, or freedom of self-determination, and we also have what we call freedom of choice. And we have to be aware that these two freedoms find their counterpart in the two forms of decisions. At any given point in time, we make decisions on our own existence, and we also make certain particular decisions that we could call categorical, relating to our particular actions. In basic freedom, human beings decide about their beings as persons. That is to say, about the person they want to be, or who they would desire to be in their life. For example, a person exercises this kind of freedom, which is basic freedom, when they decide to be a person of honest character, a person of prudence, a person of wisdom. Okay, you decide the person you want to be. And remember that we said that you are exercising your freedom directed towards God and beatitude. That freedom to pursue God and pursue happiness. Okay, so the human person, when they order their exercise of freedom and their choices in a manner that leads towards perfection, that leads towards the good and beatitude, they can choose at the basic level or the level of self-determination. Look here, I want to be a just person. I want to be a wise person. I want to be an honest person. However, for you to claim to be a just person and honest person, you must be in the habit of making just decisions. You must be in the habit of making wise decisions. So the action that we do day to day consists in our freedom of choice. Our constant choices day in, day out build into what we want to be. Okay? If you want to be a person of good character, then you must be in the habit of choosing good dispositions. If you want to be a just person, so you've basically chosen to self-determine as a just person. You must then be in the habit of exercising your freedom of choice by constantly choosing the good, by constantly choosing to be just in the small actions every single day. When you are asleep in the morning, you had to choose whether to wake up or to sleep a few more minutes. You had to decide, shall I attend this class from home or go to school? Shall I greet X? Shall I leave out Y? Those constant choices that we make in our life, when deliberated upon, can either build into the good persons we would like to be or the evil characteristics that we could choose to pursue. Okay, so the exercise of basic freedom or self-determination would be the existential decision where a person decides on the fundamental project of his or her life. All in freedom of choice, which is the second option, the daily choices we make, these are particular, they are categorical decisions, and they concern the concrete, particular actions that we take. One cannot have chosen to be the just person, but they are in the habit of making unjust decisions. One cannot say that my project in life is to be an honest person, and then they constantly choose to be dishonest, or they constantly choose to act in a manner that is dishonest. Is that distinction clear? Alvin?
Yes.
Austin, would you like to share?
No, you're
And
good.
Ragama, would you like to share?
Mja kenye nashangaa mwalimu, students ni more than 500. Zoom ina hold watu 100. Hao wengine 400 waende YouTube channel yake.
Gideon Ocheng, we have advised people to get into the YouTube thing so that they may follow the class from there. Fair enough? Okay. So we shall proceed now. So this question of freedom is very important when we talk about the morality of the human act. The morality of the human act. The first building block is freedom. If an act is not done in freedom, if someone has not freely engaged in an act, it may be immoral, but their responsibility for that immoral act is diminished. I hope some of you were alert or mature or able to understand when we had the last attack on Westgate, Nairobi. One would condemn the actions of the terrorists for sure, the evil acts. However, their responsibility for those actions can very easily be diminished if it turns out that they were not free in what they did. Assuming that one of the terrorists is able to demonstrate that, well, look here, I am here doing this heinous act because someone has kidnapped my daughter, holding them at gunpoint, and demanding that I either do what they have instructed me to do, or my daughter will be killed. Okay? That person who is carrying out an evil act would not be free in what they are doing. It doesn't make the act good. It doesn't make the act moral. But the responsibility for that immoral act is diminished. It is reduced. The act does not cease to be immoral, but the circumstances, as we shall see, will have impacted on the freedom of the individual to deliberate and choose freely to do it. Okay, so freedom is at the core of determining whether an act is moral or immoral. So as long as freedom is bound itself definitively to its ultimate good, which is God, there is the possibility of choosing between good and evil, and thus of growing in perfection, if not, of failing and sinning. Okay? So because our freedom is bound to God, in whose image and likeness we are created, now this is Christian reasoning. We are created in the image and likeness of God. God is the ultimate good. Therefore, our freedom is bound with the good in whose image and likeness we are created. Therefore, we are able to choose between good and evil. When we choose good, we are growing towards perfection of the Creator. When we fail, we sin when we don't choose good and choose evil. Now, this freedom characterizes properly human acts. Okay? Human acts are only human acts in or to the extent that they are done in freedom. Freedom is the basis upon which we praise good acts or blame evil acts. The ground upon which acts are granted merit or reproach. To be free means the use of one's freedom in truth. And the truth is that we are beings created by God in his image and likeness. The truth is that we must acknowledge God as our creator in our conduct. And it also means that we must obey the laws that are given by God for our conduct. Many young people, when you talk of freedom, they look at it as freedom to do wrong, freedom to do evil. That would be abuse of freedom. It would not be a proper exercise of freedom. And people of today appreciate freedom highly, and rightly so. Yet they often would cherish it improperly. as if it gives them leave to do everything they like, even when it would be evil. That would be an abuse of freedom. If your celebration of freedom is the freedom that lets you do evil, or that lets you choose evil acts without consequences, or your choice of evil acts without internal reflection on what you're doing to your neighbor or otherwise. Freedom, therefore, does not mean doing everything that one likes or wants. The exercise of freedom does not imply a right to say or do everything. So it is false to maintain that man, the subject of this freedom, is an individual who is fully self-sufficient and whose finality is the satisfaction of his own interest in the enjoyment of earthly goods. I'd like you to visit the chat room and reflect a little bit. Is it the case? Is it the case that you have experienced your colleagues or your peers exercising freedom in a manner that makes them look at freedom as the freedom to do evil, as the freedom to do what is wrong without reproach? Those of you who can hear me, get into the chat room and share your experiences a little bit. Just type in there. Is it the case that your peers would conduct themselves in a manner that they consider as free, just to prove a point that freedom means doing what is wrong, doing what is prohibited? You know, people say you're free when they mean you can do what is prohibited. Okay. Mm-hmm. Gertrude, you hear me? Jane Karuga, you hear me? Esther Moman, you hear me? Felix Otuke, you hear me?
Yeah.
Gertrude, you hear me? Melvin Mutuba, you hear me? Okay, we will proceed now. So the factors that determine the morality of human acts. The first is the object. The object is what is chosen as the good towards which the will deliberately directs itself. Okay? And the principle here is, the object that we choose to do or to act upon, the act that we choose to do must be good in itself. There are some acts that are intrinsically evil. There are some acts that are intrinsically immoral. So we cannot choose them regardless of the reason. So the starting point is that what you choose to do in freedom, what you choose must be intrinsically good. Okay, so the object must be good in itself. That object that you choose to act upon or to do, object of the act, the what have you chosen to do? Okay. There are some actions that are intrinsically evil, like murder. Okay. When the action you choose to do is designed to kill, there is no way you can talk of morality of that act, because the act is intrinsically evil. Okay, the object of what you choose to do is intrinsically evil. The second factor that we use to determine the morality of a human act, whether an act is moral or immoral, we ask ourselves, why did the moral agent do it? What is the intention? Okay. And the intention is the end in view of which the moral agent undertakes the act. Okay. So the end is the first goal of the intention, and it indicates the purpose that is being pursued in the given action. The intention is a movement of the will towards the end. It is concerned with the goal of the activity. A good intention does not make behavior that is intrinsically disordered, such as would be lying or calumny, good or just. If something's already intrinsically disordered, a good intention, you see, I did this to do that, or I did this so that good might result. The principle that the end does not justify the means is very important. What you choose to do, what you intend that comes out of that action must be both good in themselves, including how you do it. Look here, my intention was good, so please forgive my action. The intention must be good, the object must be good. You don't do an evil thing in an evil way so that good might result. Okay, so the end in mind must be good, and the manner of attaining that good must also be good. The third factor is circumstances. So object, intention, circumstances. Now, circumstances would relate to the how, the where, who is doing it. And these would be the particulars of the human act that affect the moral object. Okay? Circumstances including the consequences are usually secondary elements to the moral act. They contribute to increasing and diminishing the moral goodness or the evil of human acts. They can add or diminish the agent's responsibility, such as acting out of fear of death. However, we need to note that circumstances cannot change the moral quality of acts themselves. They can make neither good nor right an action that would be already intrinsically evil. Now take note, what do the circumstances do? The how, where, and who. They contribute to increasing the moral goodness of an act or aggravating the evil of an act. See, giving alms is good. You know, giving alms is good. But if you give alms so that you may be praised, okay, the intentions why you're giving alms would have been undermined. But with circumstances, you discover that certain acts are intrinsically evil, but depending on who is committing that act, the gravity would differ. Okay? Fornication is evil. Okay? And this is the sin of fornication. But fornication, imagine, between seminarians who ought to know and nuns who ought to know, is graver. Okay? This is about who is committing it. Okay? And those of you who are interested or in the habit of breaking the 6th commandment, you're not married, but you're already fornicating. You will not do this on the streets of the university, on the campus. If you did, already what you've done is evil, but where you're doing it makes it grave. Okay? Adultery, for example, is already evil. But imagine adultery between a pastor and a congregant's wife. That would be graver. Okay? It's already grave, but the gravity of the morality or immorality is increased based on the circumstances. Who is doing it, how, and where. That's what circumstances do. They don't make what is good evil. Neither do they make what is evil good. No, they only increase the gravity. Circumstances also diminish the agent's responsibility. Just as I indicated when I was giving the example of the Westgate attack. If it turns out that the terrorists, before they came to do these terrible acts, they were being held at ransom. Their families either being held or their children, and it's like you either do that evil act or we kill your child. Now that is a circumstance of how this action is happening that would diminish the moral responsibility. Okay? Austin Okech is asking, if we can't do what we want, then we aren't truly free, in my opinion. Good insight there. It would seem, you see, no one is saying you can't do what you want, okay? It would seem, and this is a situation that Archbishop Desmond Tutu developed. He made a very nice statement. So, you know, Archbishop Desmond Tutu was the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa. The people of South Africa had suffered the evils of apartheid in the exercise of the freedom of the enforcers of apartheid. Terrible things that happened to human beings. Tortures, disappearances, okay, extraction of information, burning of houses, slaughtering of people, and all that stuff. The enforcers of apartheid, the law of segregation, okay, were exercising their freedom. And in that exercise, they chose to do whatever they wanted. And because a lot of injury had happened to the people of South Africa, when apartheid ended and a new dispensation led by Nelson Mandela came into play, a decision had to be taken whether to actually apply the law to punish all of those who had done evil acts that were allowable in the law, meaning they were enforcing the law, but also allowable in their own freedom. Austin, they were free to do whatever they really wanted. Okay, these soldiers, these police officers, these civilian cooperators with the regime were free to do whatever they wanted. Okay, but they chose to do evil. And at the end of the apartheid dispensation, a decision was being taken whether to hold them to account for the actions that they had carried out. It was decided that because the abuses were so rampant and so widespread, and proper accountability and justice would be very difficult to attain, a decision was made to have at least a truth-telling opportunity, so that those who had been injured, lost their relatives, would at least get to know, why was my son killed? Why was my daughter kidnapped? Why did my people go missing? What was the motivation behind the killers? Can I see the killers telling the truth and apologizing? I hope that, Austin, you're following. Now, during the listening to some of these episodes, Archbishop Desmond Tutu broke down and cried. Just the gravity of the terrible things that were being mentioned as part of the testimony. And when later in life is asked, what is your reflection about the human potential for evil? Desmond Tutu responds that God, who he alone would take away our potential to do evil, respects our freedom so much that he would rather we took ourselves to hell freely than him interfering. Okay, so Austin, the point I'm making here, yes, when you are choosing At the basic freedom, you can choose to be a good person or a bad person. You can choose to orient yourself towards good or towards evil. And again, at the level of the freedom of choice, you can choose to constantly choose what is good or to constantly choose what is evil. The only point we are making here that when you choose evil, you would be abusing freedom. You would be choosing to walk away from our natural or default position of the exercise of freedom towards good. So the default position is exercise of freedom towards good and towards perfection. You're actually free to choose evil, all right? But it would be an abuse of freedom. It would not be a proper exercise of freedom. Okay. Then we have someone else who's raised another issue in the chat room. Why can't we say that circumstances do not count? Because according to me, it doesn't really matter where or who does the evil or where the evil is done. But the fact still remains that no matter who commits the evil, where it is done, sin is sin, for sure. Okay, your observation on Ragama is valid. Sin is sin, evil is evil, regardless of the circumstance. But as I've indicated, that circumstances have capacity to diminish or increase the morality of an act. They have capacity to diminish or aggravate the immorality or evil of an act. Okay, circumstances can affect the responsibility for an act. Note that you're no longer responsible for the act. Note that we don't blame you for the act, but we blame you lesser for the act than we would another person. Okay, that's essentially the point we are making about circumstances. Okay, sin is sin, evil is evil, but the gravity would differ based on circumstances. Just like the legal situation. Okay, in law, for example, there used to be, in law, for instance, a person who kills another by accident is not blamed the same way as a person who kills another deliberately. Okay? And that's the basic distinction. You're playing and you accidentally trip your partner in the game. They hit themselves on a plank of wood and they die. For sure, you have killed. But do we make you as responsible for that death as would someone who picked up a piece of iron and hit the other? No. So it is in the same spirit that we talk about the circumstances. And for sure, circumstances count. We cannot just dismiss them. One who sins knowingly is blamed differently from one who sins unknowingly. You remember when we were talking about conscience, okay, and the question of the role of knowledge in conscience. Conscience is not just a feeling, it is also a knowing. And we talked about vincible ignorance and invincible ignorance. People who are vincibly ignorant are blamed more, held more to account than those who are invincibly ignorant when they commit certain acts. The act does not cease to be good or evil. But those who do them carry different responsibility based on their ignorance or knowledge of the act they are doing and its moral implications. And I hope I've explained. So a morally good act requires the goodness of the object, the goodness of the end, and of the circumstances together. So an act is good if it is morally good, its intention is good, and the circumstances are good. An evil end corrupts the action. So even if the action is good, but the end is evil, the good action would be corrupted by an evil end or evil intention. Even if the object is good in itself, such as would be praying and fasting. But if you did these two things in order that you may be seen by men or praised by men, then that evil end of such of praise, such of being seen, would corrupt the good act of fasting or praying. The object of the choice can by itself vitiate an act in its entirety. Meaning, if the object is evil in itself, okay, what you choose to do, if it is evil in itself, the entire act is evil. Such acts as fornication are always wrong to choose, because choosing fornication entails a disorder of the will. That is a moral evil. We then move into the principle of double effect. Remember, we have said the object must be good, the intention must be good, and the circumstances must be good. We know, however, that some acts may be good in themselves, but the end, the outcomes, okay, the outcomes can be either good or evil, the outcomes of our act. So this is a principle, the principle of double effect comes into play, and it is a principle that helps us determine whether or not actions that have both good and evil effects are permissible. A decision to carry out an act, an action which as a consequence has unintended bad results, may be made only when the good effect cannot be reasonably brought about in any other way but that specific action. And two, when certain conditions have been met. So you know you're about to take this course of action. You know that when you take this course of action, the intended good will come out, but there will be also some bad things that come out of that action. The question is, should you go ahead and do it? And this is when the principle of double effect comes into play. That you will take the decision to do that act which is good in itself, but has both good and evil outcomes, only if there is no other way of getting that good intention. If there are alternatives to attaining that good intention, pursue those alternatives and leave this specific procedure or action which, when done, bring evil effects. But if the only way to attain that good outcome is to carry out this action, yes, go ahead and do it, but meet the following conditions. Okay? And the conditions are, first and foremost, that the act itself must be good. Okay? The action, what you choose to do, must be good in itself. Then the moral agent, who is you, the action person, must have the right intention. Then 3, the good action must be the means to the good effect. And 4, the good effect must be proportional to the evil effect. Essentially, like for example, in war, when they use this principle, they're asking, assuming you didn't go to war, would the damage occasioned by not going to war supersede the damage that you're going to occasion when you go to war? Okay, so even in military terms, when we are dealing with the principle of just war, when is a war considered just, the proportionality principle comes into play. Okay, so the good effect, the good that you'd like to come out of this action must be proportional to the evil effect, or at least supersede it. Okay. Now, sometimes they give these cases of a woman has a cancerous uterus. If we let her carry the baby to term, they will both die. So we must carry out an operation. But we know that this operation, while has the good effect of saving the woman, it might have the unintended bad effect of killing the baby. Now, those who are interested in promoting abortion, which is an evil in itself, there are people who make money off abortion. Those who are interested in promoting abortion, which is evil, would rather say, look here, abortion is good for women because abortion saves lives. And yet, abortion actually takes a life. So, if a medical doctor is in a situation where they have to reflect on whether to carry out a procedure, they would have to think through these things. Okay? Say, is the action good? Now, abortion is evil in itself. So the doctor who is conscientious and would like to be in keeping with the exercise of good cannot choose to do an abortion because abortion is evil in itself. However, the doctor can choose an operation procedure, which is good. See, you see, you operate on the cancer, you treat the cancer, all right, which is a good act. Okay, so the act of treating the cancer is good in itself. So that one you can choose. And remember, the agent of this, the doctor as an agent has the intention of saving or treating the life of the mother. Okay, and the treatment of the cancer or operation of the cancer is a means to the good effect of a treated woman, a healthy woman, a removed cancer. Okay? The good effect, which is a healthy woman who is alive, okay, must be proportional to the evil but unintended effect. Okay? So it has to be very clear. Some people would say, do the abortion, but the abortion does not remove the cancer. Okay? The baby has been killed, but that is not the operation that was necessary to heal the woman. Okay? So those are things that in the bioethics area, they have always had to deal with. And they keep popping up. You want to do something good, but you know when you do this good, some of the outcomes of that good act are evil outcomes. If you know them, you need to first think through this principle of double effect. Double effect, one effect good, the other effect evil. All right? Should you still go ahead and do something which you know has an evil outcome? That's where the principle of double effect comes into effect. Okay? So the foreseen but unintended effect. There are some errors or mistakes in moral thinking. Situation ethics, consequentialism, proportionalism, okay? And these are errors in moral thinking. For example, situational ethics is one that says, look here, some things are good in certain circumstances and evil in others. I will take a bribe in this situation or give a bribe in this situation, and that is okay. But I will not give a bribe in another situation. Okay? Increasingly, it is becoming normal for matatu drivers or generally any drivers on highways to give bribes to police officers. Bribery and corruption is evil, for goodness sake. But increasingly, people are saying, look here, in such a situation, you give the bribe and continue on your trip, other than suffering the delays associated with being booked and all that stuff. Consequentialists also make mistakes in ethical moral thinking when they choose to measure what is evil by the consequences. To consequentialists, adultery would remain good provided you're not caught. So if they can commit adultery as long as they're not caught, well, then adultery would be good for the consequentialists. That would be an error. It would be a mistake in moral thinking. Even proportionalists. So look here, the kind of good that we are going to get out of this evil act is higher than the evil that would go on. I keep using this abortion experience because it is very current. There are people who are arguing that those of us who are trying to be pro-life, trying to protect the babies in the womb, are against women. Okay? And look here, allow the evil act of abortion to be accessible for every woman so that women can go to school, women can enjoy careers and stuff like that. So the proportionalists would rather argue that it is better to have this enjoying their careers with these babies that are a hindrance. So the argument will say it is better, the opportunities available to women in the long run are greater than opportunities they would have if they carried babies to term. So commit I would be willing to take
Najua jamaa alikuanga anauliza UMP na kile tachoa mafuta.
Thank you for the leg. Tuseme
umeoga? Umeoga? Oh. Okay.